super appreciate you all joining, and want to start with just saying this is going to be a mix of me sharing some information and us doing some activities, and then is a group doing a little bit of consulting with each other and sharing some clients and sharing some challenges, and then trying to support each other. So kind of a consultation group, and we'll see what and how that turns out as we go. See, yes, that's going to work. There is going to be a CEU offered for it, so we've got some some specific objectives for this one today, and this is part of a 3 or 4 part consultation group, monthly kind of thing. Participants begin to understanding what MI is, and today we'll actually talk about what it's not a little bit more. We're going to spend most of our energy on the spirit and why is the foundational essence of motivational interviewing. Hopefully everyone will learn some specific strategies, and we're going to talk a little bit about adolescent resistance as we go, and then hopefully share and get feedback from colleagues around a challenging case or two. I am the Director of Adolescent Services at Renew Counseling Center. We run the counseling center in Olathe and in Lawrence, and run intensive outpatient programs for adolescents and adults. So on a day-to-day basis, and actually coming in this afternoon, because we're 4 days a week, I got probably 12 in the group right now, young people struggling. And so my interest in this is that we're pretty good, and I want to get better at how do we increase willingness in adolescents, because very few of them start off at a completely excited about treatment place. And so motivational interviewing, it also helps me bring on interns and people who haven't spent the majority of their lives working with teenagers. And so this is what we do. Our adult program is in the evenings. That's my wife who founded that program, and just want to highlight some of the things we offer here in Olathe and in Lawrence. I'm going to keep going. This information is coming. I'm doing a book club right now with my interns, and we're walking through each chapter of motivational interviewing with adolescents and young adults. And so, like, if this is intriguing to you and you want to read the source material, that's the main source material. And so today we're focused on Spirit of MI. On the 10th, we'll go through core skills. On the 8th, change talk, and then we'll, if you guys are still interested in this, we'll get to processes sometime in May or after that. Keep going. I think I'll see hand signals or questions if they pop up. We got some activities that we're going to split off into in a little bit too. Primary goal of MI is to elicit and support a person's motivation for change, rather than imposing external pressure or directives. Motivational interviewing empowers individuals to identify and vocalize the reasons for making positive changes in their lives. And so, it's just it is hard to get teens to commit to things and to commit to change. And so motivational interviewing, it has a wide range of uses. Came out of the substance abuse arena for the most part, but has some real good usefulness in adolescence. So motivational interviewing, what it is: scientifically based. It is a person-centered approach. It's based on conversations about change, and not necessarily telling somebody the direction they're supposed to change. And so it's a way to help them. It's a lasting change. That its really goal is to create internal motivation for change. It's not always helpful. There's limits, obviously, and the goal is more of guiding and not manipulating or moving people. And it focuses a lot on ambivalence. So the model from the adolescent book, and I've put this here, is, and it changes a little bit. If you're already very familiar with motivational interviewing, this changes it a little bit and says spirit is the foundational piece, then emphasizing autonomy, managing the counter, change talk, and really kind of looking at these values, and knowing that your processes are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. This image will be there a lot. I really like it to think about that. If you don't have the spirit of this down, you really can't just jump into the counter talk and some of the other things. So there's not a whole lot of benefit to motivational interviewing if you won't accept the spirit and the premise, or if that doesn't fit for what you're trying to do. It's also important to know what it's not. All right. It is not theory laden. So it is not meant to be a theory of change. It is supposed to complement that. It is also not necessarily easy to learn. And so you've got to practice it. We're going to try some, each time we're going to try some activities. It's not just another technique. It's also not a cure-all. Just because you're good at it doesn't actually help you take and have direction, especially for a young person if you don't have. It's not assessment feedback. It's not a trick to make people do what you want. It's not just a subclass of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not the same as client-centered counseling. And I thought this one was really interesting because I'll tell you personally, I got my first license back in the 90s, and motivational interviewing really wasn't a thing or talked about much. And I started hearing about it. And it was like, man, that sounds really good. But why wasn't I interested in going and learning more? And it turns out one of my supervisors at some point said, you know what, you already do a lot of this in what you do. But I'm wanting to get better at this and recognize where, just because I think I'm doing a good job of motivating somebody or engaging them, that I can probably do better. And especially with the more and more challenging cases, we kind of get to a level where, yeah, I can work with these, but then there's somebody more challenging. You're like, what do I do here? And I think that's important to then be able to say, yeah, I'm going through some of these steps and I'm looking at it in that way. So motivational interviewing is not, if you're practicing and if you start putting these things into place, it'll become more and more of what you're doing, but it may not be just because you recognize some of what we're talking about, what you're doing just yet. All right. So today is on the spirit. And our authors would say the spirit equals mindset plus heart set using PACE, partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. I really like this quote, and it's going to complement one later, but don't laugh at a youth for his affections. He is only trying on one face after another to find a face of his own. I think this is helpful, like to think about like a young person, like, yeah, they're different. I actually have the expectation of my interns or anybody coming to come like just observe our group to watch on more than one day, because we don't always see the same young person on Monday that we see on Wednesday, or Thursday is different this week than it is next week. And so they are trying on, they're meant to developmentally, they're supposed to be trying on different things. And I think the other benefit of thinking about them this way is that there is room for change if you can help them figure out what that feels like. So going back, the spirit piece, spirit's such an interesting concept of what does it mean? All right. So mindset, heart set, I like to think of, this is a good example for learning behaviors, changing behaviors, but I also think it applies here. Have you ever, you should try sometime to teach somebody how to ride a bike only using words. All right. And so maybe like at the end of the day, you don't know if they can ride a bike until they get on the bike. All right. And so the same thing kind of applies here. You can't just talk about it. You've actually got to use the motions. You got to go with the flow. You've got to try it out. And the spirit is, man, do I really want to be in collaboration with this person, or do I want to feel authoritarian? All right. And I will tell you, teens especially know when you're trying to be authoritarian or manipulative or try and trick them into an answer. All right. And so some of the spirit is, do I really just want to collaborate, even if I know their parents don't agree with this? And not that you're moving them in that direction, but you're not just telling them it's wrong. So collaboration over authoritative is really important. All right, I'm gonna do a worksheet. I'm hoping all of you have a pen and some paper or anything in front of you, or you can think of it if you need to. But I'm gonna set a timer for 3 minutes, and I want you to essentially create this worksheet that's in front of you, or this list. Think about the worst teacher, boss, mentor, coach in your life, or multiple ones of them. All right. And then on the left column, I want you to write characteristics, phrases that they said, actions that they took. And then on each of those, how did you respond to that? All right. So does that make sense? Can everybody find a piece of paper? Can we write this down? And so one side, characteristics, phrases, and actions, and the other side, how did you respond to those? And so I'm going to like to give you 3 minutes to really kind of dig into thinking about the worst teacher, boss, mentor, coach that you've had. On your mark, get set, work on that activity. Oh, there we go. Got 1 more minute. All right, now if you wouldn't mind jumping into the chat and sharing some of those, sharing a characteristic in your response, and I'll read them to the group. Distrustful, and then my response was sad. And when my worst teacher, boss, mentor, coach was controlling, my response was to be angry. Thank you, April. Worst teacher, boss, mentor, coach was unprepared. I felt ignored. Gary, I know you've been with us. You were on first, so I'm hoping you're not feeling ignored today. Boss, mentor, micromanaging, left feeling angry. Okay. I hopefully if you did that, if you thought about it, and this is how we want to think about, and we're going to revisit this list. So kind of keep it in front of you when we get towards the end today. We're going to look at some do's and don'ts of the MI spirit. But this time, same sheet of paper, lower down. I know the page looks the same, but it's actually now I want you to think about the best teacher, boss, mentor, coach. Did have a couple more on the unprofessional and language and signs. Used embarrassment techniques, and I felt shame. And so, yeah, most of us have had a bad boss or mentor or teacher. So this time, I want you to try and wrap your head around the best teacher, boss, mentor, and coach. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. And at about 1 minute, if you've got a good list, I'll tell you to go ahead and start sharing in the chat with us. But let's take 3 more minutes and let's write out that list of best teacher, boss, mentor, coach, characteristics, phrases, actions, and your response. So go ahead and start. Down to our about 45 seconds left. Keep writing those best characteristics. It's all I'm enjoying thinking about the couple of people that I'm writing about. I know we've got some in here. I do have, I think you guys can read some of those. We've had rough mentors. I wrote down, let's see, we've got some people in here. So the boss mentor teacher was challenging yet supportive, gave professional boundaries, and the response was gave best effort. Informative, somebody's boss and mentor was informative, relaxed, and funny, left him feeling engaged easily with people. Best mentor was available when I needed him. I'm assuming that made you felt heard and supported. Boss trusting with more responsibilities, proud, responsible, satisfied. Somebody, I believe in you. Boss was interested in work. So when they believed in you, it motivated you to do more. I wrote down a couple. Had a supervisor that actually waited for my questions, like didn't just pour information or their opinions on. And when I asked, I received those opinions better. I, I don't think in lots of boxes, and so sometimes he listened to my suggestions, were a little out of the box, and I felt heard because we got to have a back and forth, and they weren't just shut down because they weren't traditional ideas. I love this one. Boss was dependable, leading me to trust her. So keep that list somewhere in front of you. We're going to review it after we've walked through PACE in just a little bit, but to some extent, you've already started thinking about people in your own lives who lived very close to the spirit of motivational interview, and thought of people who were way far from it. And so if you want to lean into the spirit, you lean towards those that made you feel a part of the process, and you lean away from those that didn't and made you feel bad or unsupported or those kind of things. All right. I love this quote based on the other one. There's, maybe you're familiar with 21 Pilots. It's a more recent band, and the song they wrote was called Stressed Out. And one of the lines in it is, and actually the album was named Blurry Face, but my name's Blurry Face, and I care what you think. And again, when I think about teenagers and young adults, I think this, like, they don't quite know who they are. They don't quite know what you're presenting to them. And even if they're acting like they don't, they may still care about what you think. And so if you can invite them into the process, then I think you have better luck and better influence over them. I would like that was not supposed to go yet. Would like everybody to throw a challenge, a phrase, something they've thought about when they're like working with young people, about why it was hard, what didn't go right, and just maybe a challenge you've had working with teens. It could be a phrase, it could be as much as they're not going to change, so why am I trying so hard? But everybody, just think about a challenge that you've had working with teenagers, staying positive or them being positive. They don't open up, or they just shut down. Gathering trust due to experiences with other adults. Defiance, not willing to try new ways of of doing things. Challenging and complaining most of the time, not opening up. I think defiance is one of my hardest ones, and they were forced into therapy. Another one of my bigger challenges was a young person whose default mechanism was just to do nothing. So they were just a blob, like, and legitimately, like, I did in-home wraparound services, and so some points I was there to try and get them to school or something else, and like they just go into blob mode and nothing mattered. So how to stimulate that. Anyone else with some challenges or that they've had working with teenagers? I'm going to assume that was saying yelling. Oh, lying. Okay. That Hillary was telling us yin and yang, maybe from psych, but lying. Yeah. Lying. You can tell when they're not bought in. Lying point. All right. You're welcome to keep sharing. I'll toss them out there as I see them. But I want to go through paces, and I'm still wanting to get us some time where we get to share with each other. I'm going to break us into all or nothing thinking. Yes, black and white thinking is a big challenging one when working with young people. We see that in the room. Again, I work with anxiety and depression, and we see that in the room all the time, and how to increase flexibility. THC legislation in Missouri makes them think it's okay for them now. Yes, it is. It's interesting. In the book, they spend a lot of energy on that, like helping the young person see some of the negatives, even if something is legal or they might be able to get away with it. But all right, so what does PACE stand for? All right, so partnership. And again, PACE is, they're not actually techniques. They're not things you can just do. They are the kind of the things that add up to the spirit of being in motivational interviewing with adolescents and young adults. And so partnership, truly believing that behavioral change will not occur in the absence of a partnership relationship with the youth. And so if you're somehow believe that you can cause change in someone else, the young person will feel it. All right. And they won't feel in relationship, and they won't necessarily want to change in your directions. I do like this description. I never thought about it this way before reading this book, but similar to a parent on the playground, there should be a balance of helping, supporting, and avoiding harm, while simultaneously allowing the child to experiment and problem solve for him or herself. Thus, collaboration involves a joint process, right? Not merely serving the client's impulses and desires, or satisfying your own or others' agendas, because another part of working with teens is you got to work with their families and their parents who want something. So you must be honest with yourself and the young person about your role in promoting both autonomous decision making and positive behavioral change. I started again in family therapy, in-home stuff, and we were really clear that there wasn't that same, like, just because you told me doesn't mean I'm going to keep it to myself. We shared with the family, we talked with the parents, we brought them on board. Somehow finding a way to engage with both parents and a young person will make you much more of a partner and much more authentic, because you're not fake to one or the other. All right, so that's partnership of the PACE, acceptance and autonomy. Profound acceptance includes respect for absolute worth, autonomy, support, accurate empathy, and affirmation. All right. You know, if you can get to a point where that person is important for themselves. And in our program, we spend some energy on validation. I'm sure all of you do too. And even helping a young person feel like they are valid regardless of their behaviors or what's going on. All right. And so a person isn't a means to themselves. All right. You know, how do you check this in yourself? If you feel annoyed when you're working with a young person, feel like the time isn't worth it, or maybe you like whoever you're working with more when they change. All of those things are little signals that maybe you're not thinking that giving this person the absolute worth that is important to acceptance and autonomy. What are you implying? Young people get lots of implication from their parents. And so as a therapist, or if you're working with teens in any way, they are used to paying attention to what you're implying. Autonomy, they truly want to believe that they are in control of their own life. And I define hopelessness and despair by essentially giving up that I have any control over my own life. And so autonomy is the initiation of a behavior. So you initiating a behavior is a key to feeling psychological healthy. All right. Not necessarily synonymous with independence, but being true to one's own values and taking ownership as the causal agents of one's own life. And quite frankly, most of the time, and it might have been Gary that said it, when they're forced to come to therapy, it's literally the exact opposite of feeling autonomous. And so how can you help them feel more autonomy? Accurate empathy implies putting yourself in the young person's shoes as opposed to feeling sorry for them or identifying with them. It's not, therapy is not, I can't even say that word. I'm not sure why I typed it in there. But being friends, we talk about, it's not a friendship relationship. All right. But you want to accurately reflect. And with my team, we've been talking, it's not just accurately reflecting the last sentence they gave you. It may be accurately reflecting something they said 3 sessions ago, combined with something they said 2 sessions ago, combined with what they just gave you right then. And then they truly know you've been listening to them over time. And then affirmation, taking a stance of hope and optimism for successful change. So again, PACE makes up the spirit of motivational interviewing and partnership and acceptance. Going to shift to compassion. All right. Most counselors come in with lots of compassion. And it's why there's in our own field, why there's so much information on setting boundaries. My own team, we talk about this regularly. We want to be compassionate and promoting their welfare, and somehow we got to balance that with everything else. And so, but it's distinct from personal feelings of sympathy or personalization. It's really a dedication for promoting their welfare. All right. And so compassion is unique to the method in that the goals of help and support are the priority and take precedence over any maneuvers, any, I would say, techniques to influence the young person. All right. So really, are they the most, not only are they worth it, but are they most important person? Are you compassionate with what they're feeling? All right. Can we actually say something like, I understand this THC use, to keep that one still in front of me, is it feels good, makes you feel all right, and that you're dealing with a lot of pain. All right. So compassion is the C, PAC, partnership, autonomy, acceptance, compassion, and then finally evocation. All right. And I think this is, especially in client-centered, this would be different than just client-centered, but it's evoking and eliciting reasons and concerns about change rather than imparting unsolicited advice. All right. And so we all have this writing reflex. I didn't think mine was quite so strong until I had so many kids. that I just want to correct whatever I think is wrong, and then they incredibly enough do it more than me. And so it really, my wife just walked in down here. She's laughing because we see this all the time. But it translates into premature problem solving. So you haven't built the rapport that needs to be there. All right. Or you've even given them the perfect advice that would make their life better. But you've stopped them from being involved in the change process and moved them back into that passive role, stifling their autonomy. And so these are tough. I'm not going to deny that. I use a lot of DBT, and somehow figuring out that tension point, all right, is important. Because if I hold this, like you can literally hear and see me crushing the can, if I don't put any tension there, it just drops. On the other hand, if I can hold it with the right amount of tension, I can hold it in place and keep it. And so finding a way to evoke implies, and it's an active process. That tension is there all the time. It takes motivational interviewing beyond client-centered counseling and into a goal-oriented intervention. You've just got to work on the goal with the young person. And so, and shift them to finding behaviors for their own personal interests as opposed to external consequences. All right. And so some of the way this is done is by developing discrepancy. So finding a way for them to accept that something is inconsistent with what they've said before. All right. So we see young people, it's actually a path of adolescence, and I teach on that in other places, but they just accept all these external demands and rules for others, but they don't actually believe in them. And then they're not going to practice them in all the time. All right. And change may be because of threats or guilt or shame. It's due to external, not internal. So you can promote behavioral change by evoking, reflecting, and even magnifying the discrepancy between the young person's values and goals and their current status quos and behaviors. And if you go back and think about that triangle that we showed, values surround the whole thing. All right. And so they're going to feel like you're much more of a partner in this process, that you're with them if you know their values. And if you don't know their values and you're just assuming you're applying their parents or somebody else's or yours or society's, you're not actually engaged with them around their values. All right. I will give a moment or two for some questions if anything pops up in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to split those of us that are here into groups. So you might have 2, 3, 4 or something in your, I try and keep it at 3, but you can share either. This is a chance to share, like, man, I'm really struggling with this right here, and I would like some help from whoever else is my group, and then you might bring that to the whole group. You could also say, how could you improve your spirit using PACE? So just wanted to give you guys a chance to talk to each other in consultation. I'll jump into the groups and also look for questions in the chat. All right, going to leave 8 to 10 minutes for that. All right, I have to, how do I get there? All right, I'm going to open the rooms right now and speak with one of those things, and I'll bounce in and out of the rooms. And if anybody, if people might, there we go.
Jason, I think everybody's muted.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. I think everybody else is muted.
Mm. And I saw the option for turning on the mic, so I turned it on. Does anybody else see the option?
I don't think anyone has their mic on.
Oh,
I
nobody
think
has their mic on? All right. I think I'm going to have to say fail on the breakout rooms.
Oh, dear.
I've got my mic on.
All right. I think I just canceled you all out of your rooms. I'm going to turn my video back on.
Oh,
I was hoping, can somebody share? Let's just do it as a group. I don't understand how breakout rooms are supposed to work. So I failed on that. I'd practice actually and tried to get it to work. But does anybody have a challenge they'd like? I wanted to spend some time just consulting, having the group share with each other some challenging cases and some solutions, maybe applying the PACE principle. You guys should be allowed to turn on your mics right now and just share. Does anybody have a challenging case they would like to share and bring up?
I have a challenge.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. One of my client that is a teenager complains a lot. For example, they were saying that they don't get much device time, but when we talk later, they say that they were watching some games video during dinner and after dinner, and they only got 15 minutes of game time. So it just kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. I want to open this up. I have a thought for you, the whole complaining. But does anybody else have any thoughts? Especially using PACE. If you do, I'm going to watch the chat. You can throw it in there or raise your hand. Kimberly, are you? Yes, you're back with us, I think, in the main room. Sorry about that. What really jumps to me is the whole complaints if you know what their values are or what matter, complaints kind of give you some room for discrepancy to, okay, so I hear you complaining about this, but you've also said connection is important to you, or spending time with your family. Obviously, I don't know their values, but usually a complaint allows, if you've got a rapport, if you've built in some of those other things, it allows for some discrepancy. Where is their complaint discrepant from what they've said is important to them?
Okay.
If you said something, I didn't quite hear it, and I would love you to actually pronounce your name, so I could know how to do that.
Vajiha.
Vajiha?
Vajiha.
Vajiha.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share on that one? And I would say, as I look at motivational interviewing and getting better at being in a partnership and stuff, and the building of the rapport, and then as they feel like I'm in partnership with them, I get a little less about it as complaints and a little bit more about maybe them even being a little more solution focused. So they actually I really need, because you can take this to the other side, is I really need some downtime, and this might be an accurate empathy statement. So what I hear you saying when you're complaining about the tablet is that maybe you need a little more downtime in your evening or your night, and that so maybe we can talk about why that's important to you and what's going on. And so it also opens up a line of discussion about what they actually want out of that downtime instead of just complaining about the tablets. And that could go even as like, I don't get to chat with my friends or whatever. Okay, so what I hear you, and don't use that. So it sounds like you're not getting as much time with your friends or being able to connect as much as you want. So you might have to use some of those complaints to find out what is really important to the young person, not just the focus of the complaint. Does anybody else have another challenging case that they would like to share, or concern that they would like some input in from others? I love technology. I just saw a floating thumbs up sign. Appreciate that. I don't spend much of my time in the virtual world doing this, so I'm enjoying this. Anybody else with a concern or complaint? Okay, I will watch chat for that as we get going. I'm going to go back to attempting to share my screen. Yep. I did put today's handout in the chat, so you can grab a link, and it takes a lot of that information on PACE if you'd like to come back to it. I do want to kind of look at some of the do's and don'ts as you thought about your worst teacher mentor and your best teacher mentor. And so it's directive approach versus spirit of NI. They go through a couple of these, but diagnostically driven. A directive approach is diagnostically driven. The spirit of MI says, it's diagnostically mindful. So I understand I need a diagnosis, especially with what I do to bill insurance. But quite frankly, it's not sufficient for change. All right. May offer guidance at times, but labels aren't necessary for change to occur. All right. And so another don't do kind of thing is act like an expert, and your advice dominates the visit. So think back to those. Actually, I think I'll just go through the list of don'ts. Don't only use persuasion. Don't think that offering a personal history will make the youth understand their own struggle. Instead of being a pervasive convincer, try to be a respectful guide. I think that's really helpful, is trying to think of yourself as a guide in this. You recognize everybody has a different path and guide the youth to discuss change options, respecting the youth's developmental stage and personal change process. Try not to use theoretical labels a lot, because again, I know it feels good sometimes to feel like an expert, but language is tough. It's been really interesting in me. One of my life challenges lately is I did take a job at Mercy, or a part of my workload right now is at Mercy and Truth, and they work with a lot of Hispanic clients, and I don't speak any Spanish whatsoever. And so language was super important. I had an interpreter, had a machine interpreting, but I had to be much more careful about my language and lingo in that. So trying to be a respectful guide moving forward in that. That somehow a don't is thinking there's one right way. Some of you shared about your bosses, and quite frankly, there are always multiple ways. You aren't sure, You know, and that's a good way to phrase it to a young person, is they're bringing up things and they say, my parents say this and a friend says this. And it's like, hey, sounds like there are multiple paths you can go down and you aren't sure which best or which one you want to listen to. Can we talk about that kind of thing? Some other do's and don'ts: collaborate, guide, respect absolute worth, don't assume to know the real problem, diagnose, or have the best idea on how to fix the problem. Don't prescribe a path. Don't compare the young people to what they should or could be. Do create an atmosphere of warmth and acceptance. Empathize without putting yourself in the young person's shoes. It's their path, not yours. Model compassion. Don't be a paternalistic salesperson. So you're not just trying to sell good things. Evoking and eliciting, which is again different from kind of just being client-centered. You're actually evoking them to move in a direction. I'm going to keep looking if there is any questions or comments. I'm going to get us finished on time. So when I talk about like having a goal orientation and not just being completely client-centered. So like in our program, and when I think about teens, this is how I use it. I use a model called DNAV. It's acceptance commitment therapy, developmentally restructured, reimagined for adolescents. And it's the V stands for valuer. And so if a young person is moving towards things that matter to them, or those values that are on, surrounding the MI pyramid, they become more authentic. They become more of who they want to be. It does have things in the way, like masking emotions and defense mechanisms. We're going to talk about unhooking from that inner voice, asking them to confront defenses that they feel like they have, asking them to ignite sparks in that discoverer, bolstering their noticer. But there's a clear path that we are actively working on, increasing willingness. So we're using motivational interviewing to get them to like decide on values. Again, I can't decide on what values are super important to other people or these young people, but I can help them figure that out. So that's our theoretical model, I guess, and how we think change happens. So we're not just hoping for them to tell us something. We're hoping to get them as partners to see that this is an important way and this is where they want to be going. But what does that look like? What are their values that would make them feel authentic? That's got to come from them. We use a process called BOLD. Just going to put it out there. Again, this is from acceptance commitment therapy, but it's breathe deeply and slow down. Why? To observe your thoughts and feelings. Once you've observed those things, you've at least put in enough margin so you're not just reacting to whatever happened. You are have room to listen to your values and what's important, and then decide on actions. The biggest bonus we've found is that there's 10 or 15 skills we can teach in each of those categories. So what I do every day, we run an intensive outpatient program. I am actively working with Mercy and Truth to form a trauma-informed counseling center around adoption and foster care in Shawnee at the moment. And love some comments or feedback. If any of that was useful or helpful or what we should do more of, please go ahead. I'll leave this on. I'll leave the chat open for a little while. But in April, we're going to look at, and if you got to the worksheet, motivational interviewing has 4 big elements: spirit, core skills, change talk, and the processes. And so right now got mapped out, and you can go to Eventbrite. If you enjoyed this or if this was helpful, we're going to go through core skills and change talk, and then eventually processes. So are there any questions, comments, feedback? Here's DNAV research. I want to go back to this page if anybody's, but anything in the chat for me to respond to, or any questions, I will throw you. And Melissa, you'll get an email in the next day or so. If you wanted to see you, we're gonna make those certificates up and send those out. Appreciate you all joining me on this. I am completely open. Again, this is one of those things I am trying to make myself better and actually use motivational interviewing, and would love to take some of you along on the way. I am going to throw my email if you have any other if you have any, I don't know, just questions about teenagers or specific cases and want to talk about it broadly, I love consulting and thinking about their whole family system and their environment and how it all plays in there, and then maybe how to come up with some strategies to work with it. So I'm going to give one more opportunity for any questions or concerns, thoughts. Appreciate y'all joining me. You guys have a great afternoon, and take care.